Following the murder of George Floyd, demonstrations against police brutality are continuing across the United States, with activists all around the world pushing for the removal of statues and monuments that honor slaveholders, and London Mayor Sadiq Khan announcing a review of all of the statues, monuments and street names across London. The Democrats have just last week put forward a legislation for reforming the police, which has been met with hostility from the Trump administration. Today, Tactics is talking to Michael Foster, who is a federal law enforcement officer with Homeland Security and a security expert. Mr. Foster, good day to you.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. Firstly, let me thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I understand that it is a very difficult time for you at the moment.
It's been very challenging. Been working a lot of hours on the front line. Also, it's been making it very challenging with my own company to address these type of issues.
I'm sure it has been. So let me start off with my first question. In fact, following the legislation put forward by the Democrats last week, could you tell us what democratic policing actually means?
So you want my personal perspective as a long time, 30 some odd years in law enforcement?
Yeah.
So first, let me clarify. We'd have to agree that there is a role for us in society, that we've created laws that we mutually agree upon that would need some type of enforcement. So how I see that is a very unique role in society, because per se, with all of our equipment and training, we're kind of have a propensity towards violence because of how we interact with public, right? You know, we got all the tools of the trade, handcuffs, pepper spray, taser, handgun, rifles, and how we use that, judiciously in the right sense can be very beneficial, or it can have a huge impact on our citizens. Mm-hmm. And invariably, we will have an impact on a certain population where, the higher crime rates, and that tends to be a lower socioeconomic class of people. And so we really have to be in dialogue with that community on what's and who would our services will really benefit. Just blanket, use of very strict enforcement law without communicating with the community at large, you're going to continue to have this divide between law enforcement and the community. And I think that's very unfortunate, where we could change that and evolve the community and better education and communication between the two, so we work together. And there has been some successes in parts of the United States that have done that, where they've totally changed the interaction with the public and how they interact with the community, and are in partnership to solve those very, very specific issues that law enforcement is best equipped to deal with. Crimes of violence, predatory behavior. That's where I think we could be of best service. But I also think we've been spread very thin. We end up dealing with a lot of issues that probably we're not very well equipped to deal with.
Mm-hmm. So you actually do believe that if there is a reform to the system, that it will actually be implemented?
Yes, I do. This conversation has been a long time coming. Been around for a long time in leadership and on the line. Been a long time tactics instructor. This conversation has been coming, and unfortunately, with a very sad event with Mr. Floyd, is brought it to the forefront of how we are in the community, and then who do we recruit? How do we get the best to come forward and represent this unique profession, so we best serve the community? So when we're really good at protecting, I think we get a lot better at serving.
Right. You're mentioning recruiting. So I think this is a question that everybody is wondering following the murder of George Floyd. What exactly is the process of choosing police officers?
So you get a very part of the reform should be standardization across multiple departments, locally, federally. So you do have different standards. Some have no no college education requirements. Some have, 4-year degree requirements. Invariably, you end up recruiting a fair amount of veterans, which is great. However, that isn't a full representation of your community, and having the ability to really bring the best forward, you would need community involvement in education and bringing people from the community and getting them interested in this very, I think, honorable profession that can be a great service. But so yeah, there's not a lot of standardization. In my 30-some years, I've seen an increase in education, training, but that's just not across the board. When I travel around the United States, I've seen a wide variety of lack of training to lack of education and you got to realize a lot of these cities don't have the budget to provide and recruit the best. And I'm sorry, sometimes you're going to get what you pay for.
Right.
And if you don't involve the community and in making this a profession that people really want to be in to really serve, it's hard. You're going to have these continuing divides between law enforcement and the community.
So depending on which community you come from, you have different standards of police officers.
Right. So when I was deployed to Katrina in Louisiana, and it was really shocking for me to see these officers having to take side jobs in uniform at grocery stores, at local businesses, just to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. Let alone trying to get them trained to a standard where they could understand the use of force and how to properly apply it. When I watch the video, I teach this stuff. There's no way with my department and departments I've been with, that we'd ever teach put your knee on the neck. And if you do, it's very, very, very temporary time, right? Things happen. But you have to be reasonable and necessary the way our laws are set up in the United States with your use of force. And I just lack of training and then education. And it's the education on the public, because there's a misconceptions about what we can do and how we do it. We are human. When you got tenths of a second to make a decision, some of the dialogue I've heard is like, why didn't they shoot the pistol out of the hand? I'm a firearms instructor. I can't do that. And I'm highly trained. So there's the reality of some of the very incredibly violent interactions that we get into, that we need to educate people on what that is. But also, again, narrowly defining what laws you want us to enforce in agreement, and how we're going to enforce those. I think that's a dialogue that needs to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite clear that a lot of police officers seem to have a different opinion on what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. How long do you think it would take to get all the police officers on the same page?
How long?
How long?
Yeah. Right now we have a huge concerted effort with a lot of attention to bring these issues forward. It's going to take a couple of years to set the internal structures within your departments and your community to provide that type of training, interact with your community, provide the education in the community. Like, what is it we do, so you understand how we interact, and then what do you want us to do? Right. We're here to serve and protect. So that dialogue has to happen. And I when as a training officer, and one of the things I do with my business is how you carry yourself. There's not a lot of instruction on how you physically wear the body language, right? You can almost tell somebody that's badge heavy, the way they carry themselves, right? There's not an education on that. There's verbal interactions, verbal de-escalation, but don't take away all the ability to use all the tools of our trade. And that's just going to take training and time, and there's going to be a higher price for that, but your incidence of these kind of very tragic things would go down. So I think it's a trade-off. When you really narrowly define what you as a community want us to do, we're in partnership, and no one cares how much you know until you know how much we care. And there's a lot of us that really care. We want to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely want to do a good job.
Would you say that it is the lack of education that is mainly responsible for the way the police officers are behaving, let's say?
Lack of education. Yeah, well, I haven't been a long time training. You never get enough time to train.
Mm-hmm.
It's the dichotomy of running the business of law enforcement and providing the education you need and the training you need to provide the best service. Mm-hmm. So when you take an officer off the street and have them go through training, they are not out there handling the calls of service that the community is wanting them to respond to. So there's got to be a dialogue, and there's got to be an education with the public of use of force. You know, the landmark case that all law enforcement in the United States judge off is Graham versus Connor. And yet I don't ever hear that discussed in the media, or very rarely, what that landmark case the Supreme Court decided on, how reasonable and necessary, and the Fourth Amendment. Because when we use some kind of force, we're depriving somebody of their civil liberties. We're saying you cannot move. So the United States Constitution says, Fourth Amendment, you are free from unreasonable search and seizure. Right? So we're going to seize you for a moment based upon the law you agree that we're going to enforce. And so that takes a high amount of education to do that correctly and hopefully reduce the incidence of these kind of things. So yeah, I do think there's an education element. There always is, but it's a two-way road with the community and with us. And setting realistic expectations of what's from us and also how you want us to be used.
Uh-huh. Michael Foster, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Cheers.